They laughed when her parents called her the family disappointment. They whispered when she walked into the room. They compared her to cousins, neighbors, strangers. But on one unforgettable night in downtown Manhattan, under crystal chandeliers and a skyline glowing like ambition itself, a microphone changed everything. Because the same daughter they were ashamed of was the one holding the future of their entire business. And when the host said her name, the room went silent. This is Jennifer's story. The night Manhattan glowed like a promise, my parents introduced me as their failure. The Hudson wind sliced between skyscrapers, cold and sharp, whipping through silk dresses and designer suits as black SUVs lined the entrance of the Grand Monarch Hotel. The building stood like a monument to ambition, gold-trimmed doors, velvet ropes, photographers shouting names that mattered. Inside, crystal chandeliers shimmered over polished marble floors. Champagne glasses clinked. Jazz floated through the air like expensive perfume. It was the kind of night where deals were born and reputations were resurrected. And I stood there, invisible in a room built for giants. My name is Jennifer Hale. I was 27 years old, and according to my parents, I was the disappointment. "Jen, just stay close and don't say anything awkward," my mother whispered sharply as we stepped inside. Her hand didn't touch me. It never did in public. "I won't," I said calmly. My father adjusted his cufflinks, platinum, engraved, a gift from a Texas oil executive years ago. He built his logistics company from scratch in Brooklyn before moving operations to Manhattan. At least, that's the story he told at galas. "Remember," he muttered under his breath, "tonight is important. Don't make it about you." As if it ever was. Outside the tall glass windows, Manhattan pulsed. Yellow taxis, steam rising from subway grates, Times Square screens flickering in the distance. Inside, ambition had a dress code. My older brother Daniel was already laughing near the bar with venture capitalists. Navy suit, perfect smile, MBA from Wharton. The golden child. I was the one who dropped out of Columbia Business School after 1 year. The one who couldn't handle pressure. The one who lacked discipline. The one who ran away. What they never mentioned was that I left because I refused to run their business the way they did. I refused to exploit small contractors. I refused to bribe port authorities. I refused to fake sustainability numbers. But in our family, morality looked like weakness. And weakness was embarrassing. A tall woman in emerald silk approached us. "Richard," she beamed at my father, "this must be your family." My father's smile widened like a rehearsed commercial. "Yes, this is my wife, Carol. My son Daniel, he runs operations now." Her eyes moved to me. "And this is—" There it was. The pause. The hesitation. Like I was an unscheduled commercial break. My mother laughed lightly. "Oh, this is our daughter, Jennifer. She's still figuring things out. Still figuring things out. At 27. In Manhattan." The woman smiled politely. "Well, that's what your 20s are for." My father added, chuckling, "She's the creative one. Not exactly cut out for corporate warfare." Corporate warfare. I swallowed. Daniel smirked slightly, raising his glass toward me. "Jen always liked side projects." Side projects. That's what they called my startup. The one they thought had failed. The one I let them believe had failed. I forced a smile. "Nice to meet you." The woman drifted away, already uninterested. And just like that, I disappeared again. The Grand Monarch Ballroom was filling up fast. Texas oil magnates, Silicon Valley tech founders, Chicago hedge fund managers, Miami real estate developers. It was a map of American ambition under one ceiling. At the center of it all was tonight's purpose. Hale and Carter Logistics was launching a new nationwide expansion project, Green Route Initiative. Supposedly eco-friendly freight transport. A rebrand. A pivot. They needed a major investor to fund the expansion. Rumor was a silent investor had already committed. No one knew who. My father had been smiling all week. "Once this deal is announced," he'd said at dinner 3 nights ago, "our family legacy is secured." Legacy. Funny word. I walked toward the balcony doors, needing air. Outside, Manhattan stretched endlessly, bridges glowing, sirens echoing faintly, the scent of roasted nuts from a street cart below mixing with winter air. New York doesn't care if you're loved at home. It only cares if you're powerful. And I had learned that lesson well. Enjoying the view, I turned. A man about my age leaned against the balcony railing. Sharp tucks, calm eyes, observant. Depends, I said. Are you asking about the skyline or the hypocrisy inside? He smirked. Bold. I'm tired of being underestimated. He studied me more carefully now. You don't look like someone who's lost. Maybe I'm not. Before he could respond, the ballroom lights dimmed slightly. The host took the stage, a tall, charismatic woman with perfect posture and a microphone that carried authority. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice smooth, commanding, American confidence wrapped in silk. Tonight marks a historic expansion for Hale and Carter Logistics. Applause. My father straightened. Daniel adjusted his tie. The screen behind the stage lit up with visuals, trucks crossing golden plains in Texas, ports in California, warehouses in Chicago. Narratives, branding, vision. And as with any great expansion, the host continued, it requires visionary partnership. A ripple of anticipation moved through the room. Earlier this month, Hale and Carter secured a major capital commitment from a private investor who believes deeply in sustainable transformation. My mother squeezed my father's arm. The host smiled, and tonight, for the first time, we reveal the identity of that investor. Silence. The kind that hums. Daniel leaned toward my father. Is it confirmed? My father whispered, yes. The host's eye scanned the audience. In a world where leadership is often misunderstood, where innovation is dismissed as rebellion, and where resilience is mistaken for failure, my heartbeat slowed. This investor built her own logistics tech platform after leaving traditional academia. Daniel frowned slightly, scaled it quietly across 3 states. My mother's smile faded, and acquired a controlling stake in Green Route through a private equity channel. My father's hand dropped from his champagne glass. The host turned toward the balcony. Please welcome Miss Jennifer Hale. The room didn't gasp. It froze. Every face turned. My parents turned last, and for the first time in my life, they were the ones who didn't understand what was happening. The man beside me stepped back slightly. You didn't tell me, he murmured. I didn't answer. Inside, cameras shifted. Whispers erupted. A wave of realization spread like wildfire. My father's voice cracked from across the room. Jennifer! I walked forward. Each step echoed louder than the jazz band had minutes ago. The doors opened. The ballroom swallowed me in golden light. I wasn't the disappointment anymore. I was the investor. And my parents were about to learn what I'd really been building. As I reached the stage, the host extended her hand. The microphone felt cool, powerful, and heavy with truth. I looked directly at my father. He looked smaller than I remembered. Good evening, I said. My father had always believed silence meant control. That night in Manhattan, silence meant collapse. The ballroom lights burned warmer than before. Or maybe it was just the heat rising from 300 stunned faces watching a family narrative disintegrate in real time. Crystal chandeliers trembled slightly from the base of the suspended speakers. Outside the Grand Monarch's towering windows, yellow cabs streaked down Fifth Avenue, horns blaring like the city itself sensed something seismic had just shifted. Inside, I held the microphone. My name echoed through the room. And for the first time in 27 years, I wasn't invisible. Good evening, I repeated, steady, calm, controlled. Across the room, my mother's perfectly curated smile had vanished. Daniel looked like someone had just pulled the floor from under him. And my father, Richard Hale, the self-made titan, the man who introduced me as the creative one who wasn't cut out for corporate warfare. He stared at me like he didn't recognize his own daughter. I appreciate everyone being here tonight, I continued, especially those who believe sustainability is more than a marketing strategy. A subtle ripple moved through the investors. My father's jaw tightened. The host stepped aside gracefully, sensing the current had changed direction. I founded my logistics platform 3 years ago, I said. After leaving Columbia. A murmur. People love a dropout comeback story, but they love a scandal even more. It was built on transparency algorithms that track real emissions, real contractor wages, and real supply chain impact. My eyes locked on my father. Not estimates, not projections, real numbers. The silence sharpened. Daniel stepped forward slightly, as if ready to intercept. My mother gripped his arm. I smiled faintly. I didn't drop out because I couldn't handle pressure, I said. I left because I refused to build something that required cutting corners to look successful. The air changed. Investors shifted. Phones discreetly began recording. My company, Route True Analytics, currently services freight lines in California, Illinois, and Texas. A man near the front whispered, "That's her." "Yes," another responded. "I've heard of Route True." Of course they had. I built it quietly, under an LLC, through nights of coding in a one-bedroom Brooklyn apartment overlooking a laundromat that never closed. While my parents assumed I was freelancing. While Daniel assumed I was lost. While my father told people I was finding myself. I found leverage instead. And 2 months ago, I continued, Route True acquired a 38% stake in Green Route through private equity restructuring. Gasps now. Controlled, but undeniable. Daniel's face drained of color. My father's lips parted, but no words came. Which means, I said gently, I'm not just the investor. I paused. I'm majority decision control. Boom. It didn't explode loudly. It detonated quietly, like precision demolition. The host blinked once. Professional. Impressed. Investors leaned forward now. Not because of my father. Because of me. Richard Hale took one step forward. "Jennifer," he said low, strained. "We should discuss this privately." I smiled without warmth. "We are." A few uncomfortable chuckles floated. Manhattan elites love drama when it isn't theirs. "You used family capital?" Daniel asked, trying to regain composure. "No," I replied. "I used intelligence." That stung. I saw it land. My technology exposed inefficiencies in mid-tier freight markets. I leveraged the data. Quietly bought undervalued shares when Green Route struggled to meet real compliance standards. Another ripple. The Green Route compliance reports had been optimistic. I had proof. Always collect proof. My mother finally spoke, voice tight but polished. "Jennifer, sweetheart, we're proud of you. You didn't have to." "Don't," I said softly. Just one word. But it stopped her. "Tonight isn't about pride," I continued. "It's about accountability." The room felt colder. Outside, a police siren wailed faintly down Lexington Avenue. New York never sleeps. It just watches. "I believe in Green Route's potential," I said, shifting tone. "But only if it becomes what it claims to be." The giant screen behind me flickered. My presentation took over. Emission discrepancies. Contractor underpayment gaps. Projected fines. Legal exposure. Every slide precise. Every number verified. Daniel whispered something harsh to my father. Richard Hale's empire had just been audited by his own daughter. Publicly. But I wasn't done. "However," I said calmly, "I didn't invest to destroy Hale and Carter. I let that breathe. I invested to rebuild it." A calculated pivot. Relief flickered briefly in my father's eyes. Too soon. "Effective immediately," I continued. "All Green Route operations will undergo third-party verification. All supplier contracts will be renegotiated with transparency clauses, and executive compensation will be restructured to align with verified sustainability metrics." Daniel stepped forward. "You can't just walk in and—" "I legally can," I said evenly. "Check the board vote from last week." His eyes widened. "Yes, last week. The silent vote. The directors who were tired of risk exposure. The ones who wanted protection. I gave it to them. For equity." My father's voice dropped lower than I'd ever heard. "You planned this." "For 3 years," I replied. The investors were no longer whispering. They were calculating. The emerald-dressed woman from earlier leaned toward another guest. "She's brilliant." That word. Brilliant. I didn't need it from my parents anymore. The host cleared her throat gently. "Miss Hale, would you like to share your vision moving forward?" I nodded. "Yes." I stepped away from the family triangle and addressed the room fully. America's logistics system runs on speed, but speed without integrity is collapse waiting to happen. Heads nodded. The next decade will punish companies who fake sustainability. Fines. Exposure. Consumer backlash. My voice steadied deeper. "I'm not here to embarrass my family." I glanced at them briefly. "I'm here to ensure our name survives." That hit differently. Because it was true. For all their flaws, they were still my parents. And Hale was still my name. I'm offering investors transparency dashboards in real time. No more creative accounting. No more marketing spin. Silence. Then, applause. Not polite. Real. Building. Spreading. Investors stood, one by one, until half the ballroom was on its feet. Not for Richard Hale. For me. Daniel looked stunned. My mother looked shaken. My father looked older. The man from the balcony stepped forward slightly, clapping slowly. He met my eyes again. Respect. The host smiled brightly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it appears Hale and Carter's future just became very interesting. Laughter rippled lightly. Tension cracked. But underneath the applause, there was something else. Fear. Because power shifts create enemies. And I had just shifted everything. As the applause faded, my father approached me slowly. Camera still rolling. His voice was low, barely contained. You blindsided me. You underestimated me. His jaw tightened. You could have come to me. I tried. 3 years ago. Remember? He didn't answer. Because he did remember. The night I showed him preliminary ethics projections. The night he told me, "This isn't a classroom, Jen. It's war." He taught me war. I just learned strategy. "This isn't over," Daniel muttered behind him. I turned to my brother. "It's just beginning." Suddenly, a commotion stirred near the back entrance. 2 men in dark suits entered quietly. Not guests. Serious. Whispers spread quickly this time. The emerald-dressed woman murmured, "Are those federal?" My stomach tightened. No, that wasn't part of tonight. The men approached the stage area but stopped short, scanning the room. One of them spoke quietly to the host. Her smile faltered. She glanced at my father, then at me, and suddenly the energy shifted again. Not business tension, legal tension. The host returned to the microphone carefully. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just been informed there is a matter requiring Mr. Richard Hale's attention." My father stiffened. One of the suited men stepped forward. "Mr. Hale!" The ballroom went silent again. My heart pounded. This wasn't my move. I hadn't triggered this. Had I? The man continued calmly. "We need to ask you a few questions regarding offshore account disclosures." Offshore accounts. Daniel's face drained completely. My mother whispered, "Richard?" He looked at me, accusing, panicked. "Did you?" "No," I said honestly. I hadn't, but someone had, and suddenly I realized. When you expose truth, you don't control who uses it. The suited men gestured politely but firmly. "Sir, we can do this discreetly." Discreet. In a room full of Manhattan elites. Phones were definitely recording now. Investors whispering aggressively. Stock implications. Liability risk. Reputation collapse. Richard Hale looked like a man realizing his fortress had cracks he never saw. He turned to me one last time before stepping down. "You think you're in control," he said quietly. "You have no idea what you just unleashed." The doors opened. Cold Manhattan air slipped inside as they escorted him out. My mother stood frozen. Daniel looked furious. The applause from earlier felt like it belonged to another lifetime. I stood center stage. Investor. Daughter. Unintentional catalyst. And as the ballroom buzzed with uncertainty, my phone vibrated in my clutch. Unknown number. One message. 3 words. "You're welcome, Jen." I stared at the screen. Heart racing. I hadn't reported him. I hadn't called anyone. Which meant someone else had been watching too. And they wanted me to know it. I slowly lifted my eyes across the ballroom. The man from the balcony was gone. The text message burned in my palm like a live wire. "You're welcome, Jen." 3 words. No name. No explanation. The ballroom around me felt distorted. Like the air had thickened, like Manhattan itself had leaned in closer to watch what would happen next. Outside the Grand Monarch Hotel, flashing red and blue lights reflected faintly off polished black SUVs. Not sirens screaming. Not chaos. Controlled. Discreet. Calculated. Just like whoever sent that message. Inside, the investors had shifted from celebration to containment mode. Groups formed in tight circles. Lawyers were already whispering into Bluetooth headsets. PR representatives were typing statements before headlines could write themselves. Daniel stormed toward me. "You did this." His voice was low, sharp, venom wrapped in a whisper. "I didn't," I replied calmly. You expose compliance issues publicly and federal agents show up? That's not coincidence. You're right, I said evenly. It's not. He stared at me. Because deep down, Daniel knew something. If the federal inquiry was about offshore accounts, that wasn't green route compliance. That was something older. Something buried. Something even I didn't have access to. My mother approached, face pale but posture still rigid. Years of social conditioning kept her spine straight, even when the world tilted. Jennifer, she said quietly, this is a family matter now. Family. The word felt fragile. It's always been a family matter, I said. Her eyes softened for just a fraction of a second, then hardened again. You've embarrassed your father. I exposed numbers. You exposed him. No, I corrected. I exposed data. She stepped closer. You don't understand how this world works. I almost laughed. I understand it better than you think. Behind her, investors were leaving early. Some cautiously, some hurried. Manhattan money doesn't linger near smoke. The host approached carefully. Miss Hale, the board would like a private meeting upstairs. Immediately. Of course they did. When the patriarch falls, the board protects the balance sheet. Daniel, I said, turning to him. Are you coming? He hesitated, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he had authority. He followed anyway. We entered a private elevator lined with mirrors and gold trim. The jazz music below faded as the doors closed. Silence. Just the hum of ascent. 37 floors up. My reflection stared back at me from 4 angles. Same black dress. Same calm face. Different power. Daniel finally spoke. Who's backing you? Myself. That kind of capital doesn't just appear. It does if you build something valuable. He shook his head. You think this is some heroic movie moment? You just destabilized the company. No, I said quietly. I stabilized its future. The elevator opened to the executive suite level. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan in full night glory. The Empire State Building glowing red and white. Bridges lit like veins across the East River. New York doesn't care about your last name. It only cares about leverage. Inside the conference room, 6 board members were already seated. 2 lawyers, 1 crisis strategist, and him, the man from the balcony. He was seated casually at the far end of the table. No tux jacket now, just a composed presence. Daniel noticed him immediately. Who is he? The chairman cleared his throat. This is Mr. Adrian Cross. Adrian Cross. The name hit me instantly. Founder of Cross Capital. Private equity strategist known for silent acquisitions and hostile turnarounds. Forbes once called him the ghost investor of Manhattan. He wasn't supposed to be here. He rarely attended events publicly. And suddenly, the text message made sense. Adrian met my eyes calmly. No smile. Just acknowledgement. The chairman continued. Mr. Cross facilitated the private equity channel through which Route True acquired its stake. My stomach tightened slightly. I knew Cross Capital handled the intermediary structuring. I didn't know he was personally involved. Daniel looked between us. You worked with him? I answered honestly. I never met him. Adrian finally spoke. His voice was smooth, controlled, precise. You built something impressive, Miss Hale. There it was again. Miss Hale. Not Jennifer. Not disappointment. Professional. I prefer transparency, I replied. So do I, he said lightly. The chairman interjected. We need to address the federal situation. All eyes shifted. The lawyer spoke first. Preliminary inquiry appears related to undisclosed offshore accounts tied to Hale and Carter subsidiaries. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's historical structuring. The lawyer didn't blink. It's exposure. My mother wasn't in the room. This was no longer a family conversation. This was corporate survival. I spoke carefully. Were those accounts disclosed in the acquisition documentation? Silence. That was answer enough. Adrian leaned back slightly. You audited Green Route, he said to me. But you didn't audit Legacy Holdings. No, I replied. Why? Because I wasn't given access. His eyes studied me, measuring. You've stepped into a war zone, he said calmly. My father raised me in one. A faint shift at the corner of his mouth. Respect. The chairman tapped the table. We need strategy. Adrian spoke before anyone else could. You need insulation. The room focused on him instantly. Hale and Carter must separate Green Route immediately. Independent governance. Independent auditing. Independent leadership. Daniel stiffened. You're suggesting a spin-off? I'm suggesting survival, Adrian replied. He looked at me. And she becomes CEO. The room went still. Even I didn't expect that. Daniel stood up. Absolutely not. The chairman raised a hand. Sit down. Daniel hesitated. Saturday. The lawyer nodded slowly. It would create distance from federal exposure. Adrian continued smoothly. Investors will support it. Markets reward decisive restructuring. He wasn't wrong. He rarely was. Daniel turned toward me. You planned this with him. I didn't, I said honestly. Adrian's voice cut through quietly. She didn't. That surprised Daniel more than anything. I invest in competence, Adrian continued. Miss Hale built competence. The chairman folded his hands. If Richard is indicted, the word hung heavy. Indicted. We need immediate leadership. All eyes on me. 3 years ago, I was told I couldn't handle pressure. Now Manhattan's financial pulse was asking if I could handle control. Daniel leaned forward. You think Dad's just going to hand this over? No, I said. I don't. Adrian's gaze sharpened slightly. He won't have to, he said. The implication was clear. Legal systems don't negotiate legacy. They dismantle it. My phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. Different message. Ask your father about Houston. 2014. Houston. I felt the blood drain from my face. That was the year Hale and Carter expanded into Texas port logistics. The year I interned briefly. The year I quit Columbia months later. I slowly looked up. Adrian noticed. What is it? He asked quietly. I didn't answer immediately. Because suddenly, I remembered something. A warehouse. Late-night shipment adjustments. A heated argument between my father and a man in a gray suit. The word reroute repeated aggressively. Back then, I thought it was standard freight tension. Now, Houston. Daniel saw my expression shift. What? He demanded. I met his eyes slowly. What really happened in Houston? He blinked. I don't know what you're talking about. But he did. The chairman looked between us. We don't have time for riddles. Adrian's voice lowered. Yes, we do. His gaze locked onto mine. Miss Hale, what are we missing? I swallowed once. Carefully. Houston was when Green Route's predecessor acquired emergency transport contracts. Daniel cut in quickly. That was hurricane season. Yes, I said quietly. It was hurricane contracts. Federal emergency funding. Rerouted shipments. Offshore accounts. My pulse began connecting dots faster than the room could process. Adrian's expression changed subtly. He understood. If federal inquiry is tied to emergency relief misallocation, he said calmly, this isn't a compliance issue. The lawyer stiffened. It's criminal. Silence. Heavy. Permanent. Daniel stood again. You're speculating. No, I said softly. I'm remembering. The room felt smaller. Manhattan glittered outside like nothing was wrong. Because to the city, nothing was. Not yet. Adrian leaned forward now, serious. Miss Hale, if you know something, now is the time. I hesitated, because this wasn't just business anymore. This was blood. But then I remembered every dinner where I was dismissed. Every introduction as the disappointment. Every time my ethics were mocked. And I remembered Houston. The night I overheard my father say, no one checks disaster numbers. I looked up slowly. They rerouted federal relief shipments through shell contractors. The lawyer inhaled sharply. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. That's not proven. It's traceable, Adrian said quietly. His eyes locked with mine. And now so are we. The implication settled. If federal agents were investigating offshore accounts tied to emergency contracts, this wasn't about money. It was about public trust. And prison time. The chairman whispered, if this becomes national. Adrian finished the thought. It will. My phone vibrated again. This time a photo. Grainy. Warehouse dock. Houston. 2014 timestamp. And my father, standing beside crates labeled FEMA emergency supplies. Crates that never reached their listed destination. Attached message. Truth always surfaces. I felt cold. Not from fear. From clarity. Someone had been building this case for years. And tonight, They chose to move. The chairman stood abruptly. This meeting is adjourned until morning. Chairs shifted. Papers gathered. But no one felt stable. Adrian remained seated. As Daniel stormed out. As the lawyers hurried. As Manhattan glowed indifferent outside. When we were alone, Adrian spoke quietly. You weren't the one who reported him. No. You're being positioned. I looked at him carefully. By you. His expression didn't change. No. That answer felt honest. Which meant there was a third player. Someone who knew Houston. Someone who waited. Someone who texted. You're welcome. Adrian stood slowly. If you take the CEO position, you become the face of this restructuring. I know. You'll also become a target. I already am. He studied me one last time. You don't look afraid. I'm not afraid of truth. He nodded once. Good. He walked toward the door. Then paused. One more thing. I waited. If Houston surfaces publicly, his eyes sharpened slightly. You may lose more than a company. The door closed behind him. I stood alone in the executive suite. Manhattan stretched endlessly below. My father was being questioned downtown. My brother was spiraling. My mother was probably calling every political contact she had. And somewhere, someone was orchestrating this from the shadows. Houston. Truth always surfaces. My phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number again. New message. Meet me tomorrow. Brooklyn Navy Yard. 8 a.m. Come alone. No signature. No explanation. Just coordinates. I stared at the skyline. At the city that never sleeps. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just a corporate war. It was personal. Very personal. The Brooklyn Navy Yard at 7:52 a.m. feels nothing like Manhattan at midnight. No chandeliers. No champagne. No applause. Just cold steel, salt in the air, and the distant groan of cargo cranes stretching toward a gray February sky. Fog rolled low across the East River like the city was hiding something. The skyline of Manhattan stood across the water, tall, untouchable, pretending innocence. I parked my car near Dock 72. I came alone. No driver. No security. No Daniel. No Adrian Cross. Just me. The text had been simple. Brooklyn Navy Yard. 8 a.m. Come alone. When you grow up in New York, you learn something early. If someone wants a quiet conversation, they don't pick Midtown. They pick places where history smells like rust. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked toward an abandoned warehouse section near Building 128. Wind whipped my coat against my legs. Tugboats moved slowly in the river behind me. Every sound echoed. Every step felt deliberate. And for the first time since the gala, I felt uncertain. Not about the company. Not about my father. But about what I might learn. Right on time, the voice came from behind me. Calm. Familiar. I turned slowly. Adrian Cross stepped out from behind a steel support beam. Dark wool coat. No tie. Hands in pockets. I didn't flinch. I thought you said you weren't positioning me, I said evenly. He gave a faint smirk. I didn't send the text. You expect me to believe that? Yes. His tone didn't shift. Cold wind moved between us. You're the only person who knew Houston mattered, I said. No, he replied. You are. Silence. The East River lapped quietly against dock pilings. Adrian stepped closer, but not threatening. Just direct. Your father has enemies. I know, but not like this. I studied his face carefully. You facilitated my acquisition. Yes. You pushed the board to make me CEO. Yes. You were at the gala. Yes. So explain why I should believe you didn't orchestrate this. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket slowly. I tensed, but he pulled out a thin manila envelope. Not a weapon. Paper. Because, he said calmly, handing it to me, if I were orchestrating this, I wouldn't need to. I opened the envelope. Inside were printed financial transaction trails. Houston. Emergency logistics contracts. Federal disaster relief funds. And rerouted shell corporations. My breath caught. These aren't public, I said quietly. No. Where did you get them? I didn't. Then who did? He held my gaze. That's why you're here. The warehouse door behind us creaked open slowly. Both of us turned. A woman stepped out. Mid-40s. Sharp posture. Weathered eyes. I recognized her immediately. Linda Morales, former compliance officer for Hale and Carter. She disappeared 8 years ago. Officially relocated. Unofficially silenced. You remember me, she said. Yes, I replied carefully. She looked thinner, tired, but steady. You were the only one who ever asked questions, she said. The wind felt colder. You're the one texting me, I said. She nodded once. I've been building a case for years. Adrian didn't look surprised. That meant he suspected. Why now? I asked. Because you finally had leverage. The weight of that hit hard. I tried reporting it in 2015, Linda continued. Internal review buried it. External agencies dismissed it. Your father had political insulation. Houston had been hurricane season. Billions in emergency funds. Chaos covers corruption. They rerouted federal supplies, she said. Claimed delivery. Pocketed margins through offshore shells. I felt sick. How much? She didn't hesitate. $32 million. $32 million meant for disaster victims. I swallowed hard. And you think federal agents are here because of this? I know they are. Adrian spoke calmly. You contacted them? She shook her head. No. Both of us stiffened. You didn't. I asked. No. Silence. Then who did? Linda stepped closer. I've been preparing documentation, yes. But I haven't filed the final submission. Adrian's expression darkened slightly. So someone else triggered the inquiry, he said quietly. Linda nodded. And they timed it with the gala. Which meant someone wanted maximum impact. Maximum humiliation. Maximum exposure. Not quiet justice. Public collapse. My mind moved quickly. Daniel, I whispered. Linda shook her head. No. He knew about Houston, but he was an architect. My heart pounded. Then who? Linda's eyes softened, but not with comfort. With all due respect, Jennifer, you're asking the wrong question. I frowned. What do you mean? You're asking who exposed your father. She stepped closer. You should be asking who protected him until now. The implication hit like a freight train. Political insulation. Board silence. Internal audits buried. Offshore accounts untouched. Someone powerful had shielded Richard Hale for 8 years. And now, that shield was gone. Why would they remove protection now? I asked. Adrian answered this time. Because he's no longer useful. New York doesn't operate on loyalty. It operates on leverage. My father must have lost value somewhere. Or crossed someone bigger. Linda handed me a flash drive. Everything is here. Contracts. Emails. Shipment logs. My hands trembled slightly as I took it. Why give this to me? Because you're the only Hale who might fix it. That hurt more than I expected. I'm not trying to destroy him, I said quietly. She held my gaze. I know. Silence settled heavy. Across the river, Manhattan shimmered cold and distant. Adrian spoke carefully. If this goes public nationally, Green Route survives under your leadership. Hale and Carter collapses. I knew that, but hearing it solidified something painful. You'll have to testify, Linda said. Against my father? Yes. The wind howled briefly through broken warehouse glass. Testify. Courtrooms. Headlines. Family shattered permanently. I closed my eyes for a moment. Flashbacks collided. My father teaching me to ride a bike in Central Park. My father telling investors I wasn't cut out for business. My father standing in Houston warehouse shadows. 2 versions of the same man. One I loved. One I couldn't defend. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't the daughter. I was the CEO. If I testify, I said slowly, Green Route must commit to a federal compliance partnership program. Disaster logistics reform. Adrian studied me. Ambitious. Necessary. Linda nodded approvingly. You're serious. I've always been serious. Adrian stepped forward. If you move forward with this, you will permanently sever family ties. I think they were severed last night. He didn't argue. Because he knew it was true. Suddenly my phone rang. Daniel. I hesitated, then answered. What? I said calmly. His voice was frantic. They arrested him. My breath caught. What? Dad. Downtown. Formal charges filed. The world felt like it tilted slightly. When? I asked. An hour ago. An hour ago. While I was standing here. Jen. Daniel said, voice cracking slightly. They're saying federal disaster fraud. Houston. It was real. Where's Mom? I asked. She's with attorneys. Silence. Then Daniel said something I never expected. You knew. It wasn't accusation. It was realization. I closed my eyes briefly. I suspected. You're going to testify, aren't you? I didn't answer immediately. Across from me, Linda watched. Adrian watched. The East River moved steadily behind them. Daniel, I said finally, voice steady, $32 million meant for hurricane victims. Silence on the other end. They lost homes, I continued. Families lost everything. His voice dropped. You're choosing them over us. I'm choosing truth. He hung up. The call ended. And just like that, my family fractured fully. I looked at Adrian. At the gala, I said quietly, you told me I was stepping into a war zone. He nodded. This is it. Linda placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. You can still walk away. I shook my head. No, because walking away is how Houston happened. Walking away is how silence protects corruption. Walking away is what my father expected me to do. I looked at the Manhattan skyline again. You wanted a CEO? I said quietly to Adrian. You have one. His expression shifted. Not admiration. Not surprise. Recognition. Then we move today, he said. I nodded. Schedule a press conference. Linda inhaled slightly. That will escalate this nationally. Good. Adrian's eyes sharpened. You're sure? No, I said honestly. But I'm ready. The wind picked up stronger now. Ships' horns echoed across the water. Somewhere downtown, my father was being processed. Somewhere in Manhattan, newsrooms were waking up to a scandal. And somewhere in this city, the person who removed Richard Hale's political protection was watching. Watching me. My phone vibrated one more time. Unknown number again. Final message. Phase 1 complete. I stared at it. Phase 1. That meant there was a Phase 2. And suddenly I understood something chilling. This wasn't just about justice. This was a takeover. Not of Greenroute. Not of Hale and Carter. But of something bigger. And I had just stepped directly into it. The first headline broke at 9:17 a.m. By 9:23, it was national. By noon, it was global. Logistics CEO arrested in federal disaster fraud case. Houston hurricane funds allegedly misused. Daughter of indicted executive now controls company. And just like that, my last name stopped being a legacy. It became a case study. Manhattan looked different when you knew your family was on every financial news ticker in America. The streets outside our midtown headquarters were louder. Camera vans lined the curb. Reporters stood bundled in winter coats, breath visible in the cold, waiting for a glimpse of someone with the last name Hale. Inside, the building felt sterile. Too quiet. Executives who once brushed past me without eye contact now stood when I entered a room. Not out of respect. Out of uncertainty. Power shifts don't just elevate someone. They destabilize everyone. I walked into the executive boardroom at 11:58 a.m. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Bryant Park. Ice skaters glided below, unaware that 30 floors up, an empire was being dissected. Adrian was already there. He didn't stand. He didn't need to. You've seen the news, he said calmly. Yes. The Department of Justice confirmed disaster fraud, wire fraud, and financial concealment charges. I nodded once. Bail. Denied. That landed harder than I expected. For all his power, for all his connections, for all the insulation I now knew existed, my father was sitting in a federal holding facility. Daniel entered seconds later, eyes red but jaw tight. You're holding the press conference at 3, he asked flatly. Yes. You're going to publicly support the investigation. Yes. You realize what that does to Mom? His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I inhaled slowly. I didn't commit the crime. But you're choosing their side. There isn't a side, I replied. There's truth. Daniel laughed bitterly. Truth doesn't work like that in this city. Adrian finally spoke. It does when leverage shifts. Daniel turned sharply. Stay out of this. Adrian didn't flinch. I don't operate emotionally, he said. You should try it. The tension snapped like ice cracking. I stepped between them. Enough. Both fell silent. Greenroute separates today, I continued. Independent governance, full federal cooperation, internal audit release. Daniel stared at me like I'd betrayed blood. You're dismantling Dad's company. No, I said evenly. I'm saving what can be saved. He leaned forward, hands on the table. You think the people protecting him are just going to let this unfold? There it was. The first time he acknowledged it openly. You knew, I said quietly. His silence answered. Not details, he snapped, but enough to know Houston wasn't clean. And you stayed. He didn't deny it. I felt something inside me fracture further. You're not innocent either, I said. His jaw tightened. You don't survive in this industry by being innocent. Maybe that's the problem. Silence. Adrian stood slowly. You both need to understand something, he said calmly. Your father's arrest is not the endgame. Daniel looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Adrian walked toward the window, looking out at Manhattan. Protection doesn't disappear randomly. Someone higher removed it. I felt my stomach tighten. Phase 1 complete. What's Phase 2? I asked quietly. Adrian turned toward me. You. The word hung in the air. Daniel blinked. What? You're the clean Hale, Adrian continued. The reformer. The redemption story. I understood immediately. They want Green Route federalized, I said slowly. Adrian nodded once. Public-private disaster logistics partnership. Linda's words echoed in my head. Disaster logistics reform. Had I walked exactly where they wanted me? Daniel stared at me. You're being used. I didn't deny it. Maybe, I said. Adrian's voice sharpened slightly. The question is whether you use them back. That's the difference between a pawn and a player. The door opened suddenly. Our legal advisor rushed in. There's a sealed federal memorandum circulating, she said breathlessly. Proposal draft for National Disaster Logistics Oversight Restructuring. She placed the printed document on the table. Across the top, Preliminary Strategic Transition Framework. My pulse quickened. Adrian scanned it quickly. They're fast, he muttered. Daniel looked at me. They were ready for this. Yes, they were. Houston happened in 2014. Linda tried reporting in 2015. Protection held. Until now. Which meant this wasn't sudden. This was timed. Adrian looked directly at me. You stepping into CEO last night legitimized the transition. Cold realization settled in my chest. If my father had remained CEO, federal seizure would have been messy. Market collapse. Investor panic. But with me, they had continuity. Stability. A clean face. I exhaled slowly. So what are you saying? I asked. That your father's fall created a vacuum, Adrian said calmly. And Washington intends to fill it. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. They're turning us into a federal partner. Or a controlled entity, Adrian corrected. The difference was subtle, but massive. My phone buzzed. Private number. I answered. Miss Hale, a smooth male voice said. Assistant Secretary of Infrastructure Operations. There it was. Federal. We'd like to discuss Green Route's role in upcoming national logistics reform. Of course they would. 3 p.m. press conference. I replied calmly. After that, a slight pause. Efficient. We appreciate your cooperation. Cooperation. That word again. The call ended. Daniel stared at me. You're not actually going to. I am. His voice rose. You're handing them the company. No, I said quietly. I'm negotiating. Adrian's eyes flickered with approval. You understand now, he said. Yes, I did. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice alone. It was restructuring power. My father wasn't arrested simply because of morality. He was removed because he was no longer strategically useful. And I was. The disappointment had become the solution. The daughter dismissed as weak was now the acceptable face of reform. At 2:58 p.m., I stood behind a podium outside Hale and Carter headquarters. Microphones crowded the stand. Logos from CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, Reuters, Bloomberg. The winter air was sharp. Reporters shouted questions before I even spoke. Did you know about Houston? Are you testifying against your father? Is Green Route cooperating with federal authorities? Cameras flashed. Manhattan traffic roared behind barricades. I stepped forward, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a decision. Today, I began clearly. Green Route Logistics announces full cooperation with federal authorities regarding past disaster relief contracts. Murmurs. We are separating governance from prior executive leadership and implementing independent oversight effective immediately. Questions erupted. I raised a hand. My father's legal situation is personal. A pause. But disaster victims deserve transparency. Silence fell. I will testify if called. Gasps. Somewhere downtown, my father would hear that. Somewhere in our Upper East Side home, my mother would break. Daniel stood off to the side, watching me like I'd become a stranger. I believe in rebuilding systems, I continued, not protecting corruption. The words echoed into cold New York air. And I believe leadership means accountability. I stepped back. Reporters shouted more questions. But I had already said what mattered. As security guided me back inside, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Final message of the day. Phase 2 initiated. My chest tightened. Adrian caught my expression. What now? I showed him the screen. His jaw shifted slightly. They're moving faster than expected. Who is they? Daniel demanded. Before either of us could answer, the large screen in the lobby flickered. Breaking news banner. A familiar face appeared. My mother, standing outside a courthouse. And she was speaking. I stand by my husband, she said tearfully. And I reject the narrative being pushed by corporate opportunists. Corporate opportunists. Her eyes looked straight into the camera. I will be presenting evidence that challenges the timeline being portrayed. My blood ran cold. Evidence? What evidence? Daniel whispered. Mom, what are you doing? Adrian's voice lowered. She's countering the narrative. On live television. My mother continued. And my daughter is being manipulated. The reporters behind her erupted with questions. My heart pounded violently now. Manipulated? By who? Before I could process, another news alert flashed across the bottom of the screen. Anonymous source leaks alleged emails suggesting prior knowledge within Hale family. My stomach dropped. Emails. Daniel turned pale. What emails? The lobby screen shifted. A blurred image of a 2014 email thread appeared. Subject line. Reroute confirmation. And below it, my name. I couldn't breathe. I stepped closer to the screen. Timestamp. Houston. But I never approved reroutes. I never. Unless someone used my intern credentials. Adrian spoke quietly. This is escalation. Daniel turned toward me slowly. Jen. I shook my head. I didn't. But on national television, it looked like I did. The clean Hale. The reformer. Suddenly tied to Houston. Phase 2 initiated. And now I understood. This wasn't just about removing my father. It was about controlling succession. If I was discredited, Green Route wouldn't go to me. It would go to federal receivership. Total control. Total restructure. No Hale at all. I felt something ignite inside me. Cold. Focused. They thought I was the disappointment. They thought I was the solution. Now they were trying to make me the scapegoat. Adrian looked at me carefully. You have 12 hours before this narrative solidifies. Daniel whispered, shaken. What do we do? I looked at the screen. At my name under that subject line. At my mother defending my father. At the federal memorandum waiting. At the invisible players moving pieces. Then I looked at Adrian. Find the original server logs. He didn't hesitate. Already on it. I turned toward Daniel. Tell Mom to stop talking. He stared at me. You still think you're in control. I met his eyes. No. I said calmly. But I'm about to be. Outside, Manhattan roared forward like nothing had changed. But inside Hale and Carter headquarters, the real war had just begun. And this time, they picked the wrong daughter. At 12:43 a.m., Manhattan felt electric. Not the romantic kind. Not the skyline postcard kind. The dangerous kind. The kind where decisions are made in glass towers that never officially exist. Bryant Park below our headquarters was nearly empty. Snow flurries drifted under yellow streetlights. Taxis hissed past wet pavement. News vans still lingered. Inside the executive floor, only 3 lights were on. Mine, Adrian's, and the server room. Phase 2 initiated. They thought they could frame me with an 8-year-old email. They underestimated something. I built my own platform from raw code. I understand digital footprints better than I understand family loyalty. Adrian walked in at 12:47 a.m., sleeves rolled up, phone in hand. "We accessed archived exchange backups," he said calmly. Daniel stood near the window, pacing like a trapped animal. "And?" I asked. Adrian handed me a tablet. "There was a login from your intern credentials," he said, "but not from your device." I scanned quickly. IP address: Houston Port Authority. Timestamp: 2:17 a.m. I was in my dorm room at Columbia that night. There were photos. There were texts. There were security keycard logs. "They used my access," I said quietly. Daniel looked up. "Who?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked at the metadata. Authorized override, executive admin. I felt cold clarity wash over me. "Dad," Daniel whispered. I didn't want it to be true. But it was. Richard Hale had rerouted disaster supplies using my intern credentials. Not just fraud, premeditated insulation. If it ever surfaced, it would lead to me. The disappointment. The expendable one. 8 years ago, I thought I left Columbia because I didn't belong in his world. Now I realized. I left because somewhere deep down, I knew I was being positioned. Adrian studied my face carefully. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. But my voice didn't shake. Daniel ran a hand over his mouth. "He wouldn't," he muttered. "He did," I said quietly. Silence settled heavy. Outside, snow thickened slightly. Inside, truth crystallized. My father didn't just commit fraud. He engineered a backup scapegoat. And that's when something inside me finally stopped hurting. Because betrayal only cuts when you still expect protection. Adrian broke the silence. "We released this before sunrise." "Yes." Daniel looked at me sharply. "You're going to publicly prove Dad framed you? I'm going to publicly prove the truth." He looked torn. "He's still our father." I held his gaze. And those were still disaster victims. Silence. Then, Daniel exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said quietly. For the first time since this started, he stood beside me. Not behind our father. Not against me. Beside me. At 2:30 a.m., we sent the evidence package directly to every major network that ran the earlier leak. Server logs, device verification, geolocation confirmation, executive override trace. No spin. Just data. At 6:12 a.m., the first correction aired. New evidence suggests intern credentials were compromised. By 7 a.m., the narrative shifted. Again. Downtown Federal Detention Center. 9:45 a.m. I didn't tell Daniel I was going. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell Adrian. But I needed to look at him. Through glass. Through truth. My father looked older than he had 2 days ago. No tailored suit. No cufflinks. Just a gray uniform and controlled breathing. He picked up the phone on his side of the glass. I did the same. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "You always were smarter than I gave you credit for." It wasn't an apology. It was an acknowledgement. "You used my credentials," I said evenly. He didn't deny it. "I needed insulation." "You needed a scapegoat." His jaw tightened slightly. "I never thought it would surface." "That's the problem," I replied. Silence. He leaned back slightly. "You think Washington is your ally?" he asked. "No." "Then understand this." His voice lowered. "I wasn't removed because of Houston." I watched him carefully. "Then why?" He leaned closer to the glass. "Because I refused something." That caught me off guard. "Refused what?" His eyes hardened. "Full federal absorption of private logistics infrastructure." My heartbeat slowed. "They wanted national disaster control through private partnerships," he continued. "Permanent integration." The memorandum. Phase 1. Phase 2. He continued. "I built insulation to protect leverage. When I stopped cooperating, insulation disappeared." I stared at him. "You're saying this was retaliation?" "I'm saying," he replied quietly, "power doesn't tolerate independence." I searched his face for manipulation, for lies, for performance. But I saw something else. Resignation. "Then why frame me?" I asked. His silence answered. "Because I was replaceable." He finally spoke. "You were leaving anyway." That hit harder than I expected. "You were never going to play the game. So you made sure I couldn't." His eyes flickered briefly. "Regret? Maybe." "Jen," he said quietly, If you take their partnership, you won't control it. I leaned closer to the glass. I won't be controlled. He gave a faint, almost sad smile. You're my daughter. For the first time in years, I believe that wasn't an insult. Time ran out. The guard tapped his shoulder. As I stood to leave, he said one final thing. They're watching you now. I didn't turn back. I know. Green Route headquarters. 3 weeks later. The snow had melted. Spring crept slowly into Manhattan. Bryant Park trees hinted at green. Sidewalk cafes reopened. The city moved on. It always does. Richard Hale's trial date was set. My mother stopped speaking publicly. Daniel officially stepped down from legacy operations and joined Green Route under compliance restructuring. And me. I rejected the memorandum. Not loudly, not dramatically, strategically. Green Route entered a limited federal oversight contract, but refused full absorption. We built an independent disaster logistics verification system accessible publicly. Every contract, every shipment, every dollar. Transparent, untouchable. Adrian stood in my office one afternoon watching the dashboard projections. You just made yourself inconvenient, he said. Good. He studied me carefully. They'll test you. They already are. A pause. You could have walked away, he said. I know. He nodded once. Respect. Then welcome to the real game, Miss Hale. I smiled slightly. Jennifer. He nodded. Jennifer. 6 months later. I stood on a rebuilt street in Houston. New houses lined the block. Children rode bikes. A community center stood where debris once filled floodwater. Green Route's verified logistics had funded and delivered reconstruction transparently. No shell companies. No offshore accounts. No reroutes. Just accountability. A woman approached me quietly. You're the Hale daughter, she said. Yes. She studied me for a moment. My sister lost everything in 2014, she said softly. This time it was different. Her eyes held mine. Thank you. That was it. No applause. No gala. No chandeliers. Just impact. As I walked back toward the car, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My breath paused for half a second. I opened it. Phase 3 unnecessary. You chose well. No signature. No threat. Just acknowledgement. I looked up at the Houston sky. Blue. Open. For the first time in months. I felt peace. Final message. My parents once introduced me as the disappointment. The daughter who didn't fit. Who asked too many questions. Who walked away. But here's the truth. Sometimes the disappointment is just the one who refuses to inherit corruption. Sometimes the black sheep is the only one willing to break the cycle. And sometimes, the investor isn't the one with the money. It's the one with the courage to risk everything for integrity. New York taught me leverage. Houston taught me responsibility. My father taught me strategy. But life taught me something better. Power without accountability collapses. Truth without courage stays buried. And family without integrity is just a name. I kept the name, but I rewrote the legacy.